I'm going to be working on the Olympus XA2 today, and I have a problem with the shutter button where whenever I press it down, it's not taking the picture. When I first got it at a thrift store, it was doing it, and then it just kind of stopped. I was also halfway shooting film, and I ended up rolling it back into the canister, and I'll shoot it back out to where I was and where I left off, so that way I can keep using this roll again. The only thing you really have to do with that is just make sure that the shutter on the lens is blacked out, so that way an image doesn't actually get to the film when you roll through and hit the button. So first I'm going to start with unscrewing the bottom, and I'm going to go right here where the self-timer and battery slot is, and you can see there's 4 other ones that we have to do too to take off this bottom plate. Shimmy this. I've got the battery still left in it, but if you just shimmy it loosely or carefully, you will take it off, and then the batteries will just fall out. Now we're going to do the part right here. Going to take off this screw. And then we're going to move to the rewind part. We got to get this one right here, and then we got to get these 2 underneath here. So now that we got those 2 off, we're going to slide this back, and this is the next piece that we're going to take off. We had to take off the bottom so that way we could pull this piece off. And this one you have to kind of wiggle a little bit because there's this little bearing underneath there that helps it roll back and forth. And of course you don't want to break this, but you also don't want to send that bearing flying off because it's pretty tiny. You'll see it kind of pop out of here towards the bottom left part of the screen here in a second. There we go. And it fell down into the bottom. So that's that screw right there. You are not going to mess with that. Just don't even touch it. It keeps that bearing in place and it doesn't have any effect. Just wiggle this a little bit. Just be a little cautious because there is that little lever there that latches that thing back and forth, and of course you got these wires in here. Now we're going to unscrew these 3. That's what's holding the shutter button down. So now I'm going to unscrew this. So now that I got those out of the way, we'll move on to the shutter button itself. And I got some tweezers that I'm going to move it all around with because my fingers are pretty stubby and it's all clunky. But this is what we're going to clean. We're going to do a swab of that with some white vinegar, and then we're going to pull this piece out here, and we're going to fix up those springs a little bit and wash those too. Last time I ended up gluing the golden springs down to the red plastic because I think it was glued before, and then it eventually came off, and I think as the button was getting pushed, it was coming loose again. And so I glued it down just with some Elmer stick glue, and it has held pretty well. And then that gray piece just kind of sits by itself. This time I'm going to bend the springs back a lot more to make it very springy. And then I'm just going to screw it down, not as tightly. So now we got our swab with some white vinegar. We're just going to rub all that metal part down, all that golden part down, on there and on here. Just get it really good. I've already done it a little bit more, so I'm just doing light touches, and now I am bending this back. Try to be a little careful because these are pretty thin and you don't want to break it, but I'm bending these things quite a bit so that way they can connect really well. Now we're just going to lay it back down and screw it back in, and I won't bore you with putting all the screws back together. You just do everything in the reverse order. That little piece right there, you're going to want to watch out for it because it'll get in the way, but if you just shimmy this around a little bit, it pops back in pretty easily. You just got to push around it to make sure everything pops in place. And then you'll just keep screwing things back in. Now this piece is what I'm going to show you. You want to take that little metal piece, put it in there. But first, you'll want to put it in here. This seems to be the best method. Someone on Reddit suggested this, and they suggested by doing it upside down. And I'll show you how tricky it can be. And you might have to restart it, set it down on the ground a little bit more, and do it like such. Eventually you get the hang of it and you can do it pretty well, and you'll just hear it pop in. Once it does, you slide this back and forth and you can hear it click into those different slots, and that's how you know you've got it going good. If it moves too smoothly, you need to redo it. Alright, so now it's working. It is winding and snapping off, and you can see the lens moving back and forth as well as hearing it. I did this like 20 times just to double check. The biggest difference now is that it pushes down a little bit further, but I think that's going to help it a lot. So now my XA2, aka Scratches, is going to work really well, and I will give an update on the screen here if it's still working.